Thank you everybody for joining. The topic of today's webinar is on ExaGrid and Veeam, the best duo since PB&J. So some of you might be familiar. I see a few of you on the call who I know are using either Veeam or ExaGrid, and at least a couple of you I think are using both. So thank you for joining today. If you aren't familiar with me, my name is Adam Gassensmith. I am responsible for Peters and Associates managed services and support offerings. But the main point of today's presentation is to look at the two solutions, ExaGrid and Veeam. But I'm going to start a little bit just by setting the stage. And I know if you've been on one of our security presentations before, this has probably been drilled into your head. You might have memorized my talking points by now, but we think it's important. So I wanted to start by framing backup and recovery in a place of security for everybody. And I'm just going to go ahead and build this entire slide here. I don't need to slow walk these things since I've covered them before. But I wanted to make sure that backup and recovery is firmly squared in everybody's mind from a security perspective. I think that's happening more and more recently. People are seeing it that way, and I'll explain why in a little bit. But less so on the operations side, and more so that having reliable, trusted, secure backup is a key to your security framework. And we use the Nist cybersecurity framework. We recommend it for a lot of our customers that aren't regulated. Nist is National Institute of Standards and Technology. They kind of developed this framework to help organizations that aren't regulated by, say, a HIPAA or a PCI or a DFARS, organizations that didn't have those kinds of guidelines to think about and build their own security strategy. Nist is a great stand-in for helping to generalize these things. So quickly from left to right is identifying what kind of data do you have, what's critical from a security perspective, what's critical from a operational perspective, and prioritizing that data in terms of what needs to be highly available, what needs to be backed up and more frequently, and that type of thing. Protect is our traditional security that we think about, making sure AV's on there, making sure that security patches are applied in a timely manner, configuring things like firewalls and just basic security hardening type stuff. Detect is monitoring and alerting. So, how do you know when you've been breached? When you find out you've been breached, there's a lot of work to do to determine what has truly been compromised already. And obviously, the sooner we can figure that out, the quicker the response and the recovery period is. Respond is all about having an incident response plan that is tested, making sure everybody knows their roles for how you react during an incident. Once you've determined that you have been breached, what's your process for calling your insurance company, bringing in a forensics team. Peters and Associates gets brought in quite a bit to assist with these things, working hand in hand with forensics teams and the insurance company to help with cleanup of incidents. But then lastly is the recover side of things, which is obviously having backup and recovery that has been tested, that is available, is the key, especially when it comes to something like ransomware. You have a decision to make if you are ransomed to pay the ransom to the attackers, or if you've got the backup data safe and secure, you don't even need to bother with that. Or are we going to risk losing data and not paying the ransom? And so really that's why backup and recovery and having a secure strategy, which both Veeam and ExaGrid help to address, is so important to your overall security strategy and kind of that last line of defense when it comes to something like ransomware. So just a couple of things, and the statistics I put up here, this is from 2017. So even 4 years on down the road, I think these have probably shifted to an even greater degree. But especially with the prevalence and the advances in how attackers are are structuring their attacks and the steps that they're taking to make things more painful for an organization. So, but this 2017 State of the Channel ransomware report showed that 96% of SMBs with a trusted backup and recovery solution were able to fully recover from a ransomware attack. Again, that is, we'll talk through some of those steps a little bit later, but that's having backups that are secure, that are able to be recovered from or tested, not corrupted data, allows you to really be able to rely on those in the event of ransomware. And then the same report found 40% of SMBs without a trusted backup and recovery solution unable to recover quickly from these ransomware attacks, quickly or fully, whether it's partial data coming back or just not fully being, or not entirely being able to recover from these. And again, even since 2017, the trend has accelerated where more or less, if you get a ransomware attack, your backups are going to be deleted beforehand if the attacker is able to find them, or they're going to be encrypted early on. And so we'll again talk through how Veeam and how ExaGrid address those two. So all of that being said, I think we know backup and recovery is important, especially as it comes to security. We'll introduce the main topic and get into the presentation with our speakers in just a second here, but we've got Veeam Secure Backup Solution. Veeam is the engine, the orchestrator. We use both Veeam and ExaGrid in our own backup strategy to make sure that things are secure. So Veeam is really that peanut butter piece. ExaGrid has the enhanced storage and security that they'll talk through as the jelly, and then we'll close out talking about Peters and Associates, co-management of backup solutions and some other ways that we can help out. Our speakers today, Michael Brown, comes to us from Tech Data. He's been with Tech Data for 25 years. He's current role as Field Solutions Architect with Veeam Software, but he's touched a number of other solutions there as well. So it's a terrific and knowledgeable resource. And we also have Patrick Murray. Patrick has actually presented with us before. He's a systems engineer with ExaGrid, and he actually spent about 4 years with Veeam in the past. So really knowledgeable about both of these solutions. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to Mike, who's going to talk about Veeam Secure Backup and a little bit of the new features that are coming in Veeam.
Thank you, and thanks everybody for joining. Really excited here to be on this call to talk about Veeam. I'm going to go through a few things actually for understand some of you are existing Veeam partners, so we are on the verge of launching a new release. So I am going to cover some of those new features, so you guys will kind of get a sneak peek. But before we do, we'll talk about a little bit about Veeam and you know who Veeam is for those who are not familiar with Veeam. Veeam is probably one of the biggest players in the backup market. There's a lot of talk from partners, a big adoption rate with Veeam. Been in the industry for over a decade now, and we're focused on backup. That's what we do. That's all we do. We're not into any other products or anything like that. We're really about, you know, as Adam had mentioned, right? Those challenges of, you know, we all know the threats that are out there, but being able to recover from them, right? Making that seamless and easy for customers to be able to recover that data and you know, and do that at a, you know, at a minimal or mitigate a lot of those costs and overhead there. So, you know, we've been around quite a while. The big thing that I like to talk to partners, you know, about is it's all customer driven. You know, the features and everything that we've you know brought to market over the last decade has been customer driven. So that net promoter score there of 73 is the highest in the industry, and it is really, you know, through the customers that, you know, we listen to in driving those features that are relative to, you know, the market today. So you'll see in the later presentation some of the new enhancements. Those are really driven around what customers want. And you know, if you ask many of our customers out there today, they're all going to tell you that Veeam just works. There's not a lot of issues or challenges. It's one of those things that, you know, most customers find it easy to adopt Veeam as far as their backup strategies go. So if we look here at the customer challenges in 2021, right, a lot of these are the same things that were, prevalent in the years prior to that. But, we did add some additional complexities, right? Being remote and, not being, at the office there to be able to kind of mitigate or manage some of that. So, there's some things that add to that. So we had to, enhance or open up certain things to get that remote access, which also creates more exposure. So, those were big challenges for companies as they open, the doors there, making sure that they are safe and mitigating them from additional, ransomware attacks, or, making sure that they are, still maintaining their backup schedules and all that, right? It adds some additional complexities. So those are some challenges that customers are met, that were met with in 2020, and that definitely some things that Veeam has done to mitigate that, and has helped partners with the technology that we deliver to market, right? And through that is our main product, our Veeam Backup and Replication. So from the simple backup recovery, whether that be on-prem or cloud-based workloads, right? That's really the heart of our software, is our backup and replication engine. Being able to set up backup jobs, being able to automate those backup jobs, doing replication jobs, and even setting up policies to do the failover. If we have a site outage, right, being able to kind of mitigate that outage and recover from that in a quick and automated fashion is really what the Veeam Backup and Replication product really brings to market. And security and all that being part of that. Veeam's vision is really that holistic platform, if you will, right? Whether it's customers that are making their journey to the cloud, or whether they're already into that journey, having that data mobility and being able to protect those workloads in those different deployment methods, right? Out in Azure, AWS, right? Having the ability to back them up, restore them from one infrastructure to the other really is really Veeam's vision, and how we kind of deliver that data mobility throughout that whole industry, as well as making sure that we're monitoring it, we're making sure that we're maintaining our governance and compliance within that space is also part of that cloud data management platform that we kind of deliver on. And how we do that, right? There's different ways that we kind of look at that. So we have different tool sets. From monitoring, those monitoring analytics, that's our Veeam One platform. That's where we can kind of look at the holistic environment and make sure that we are protecting those workloads. We're making sure that we are not orphaning any backup jobs and keeping those backup jobs on storage that we don't really need to keep. For any periods of time. When those VMs go away, we need to make sure we get rid of the backups as well if we don't need it. So, security audits. There's just so much with our Veeam One platform that delivers that whole holistic management through a single pane of glass. Orchestration, allowing us to do that, failing over from site A to site B, right, and integrating, through through the VMware platform, kind of coordinating, those type of failover services. That's just another product in that whole platform that we have. Veeam Backup and Replication is the platform I obviously talked about. That's our heart and soul, but there's a lot of tools in there that don't get, discussed with a lot of our partners. Our data labs is a way of, spinning up this isolation environment to test out VMs and make sure that they're, working, after the backup job, and automating a lot of that from a reporting standpoint. So you're not spending your weekends testing out backups. Veeam can automate all of that for you on the back end. And the other one is universal storage APIs. So that's, a lot of, with Veeam, we're API driven, and we leverage APIs for that integration into the storage platforms, as well as even our hypervisor environment. We use APIs so that we don't have to deliver agents and deploy agents out into the environment to make it easier to manage those environments. So big part of today's conversation is that that integration with ExaGrid, right? And that's all API driven. And there's a lot of things that the ExaGrid teams are going to talk about today that it's going to really talk about, what we're doing collectively from a Veeam strategy and an ExaGrid strategy to kind of enhance that whole backup environment. So like I mentioned in the beginning, sneak peek to the version 11 that's coming up. There's over 150 enhancements. The release is set for February 24th. For those that haven't heard, we will have a big launch date. You can register for that today to get on that webinar and that launch. But again, over 150 enhancements. We're going to talk about five of them specifically in today's meeting here. This is all going to be focused around the Veeam backup and replication. There are enhancements in our Veeam 1 product that I just don't have time to talk about it, but part of that these new features is really how Veeam is staying #1 in that market, right? We're listening to our partners and making sure that we're delivering new features that are relevant to our customers. So the biggest enhancement that we're delivering today is an enhancement to our replication product. This is a new replication engine that we're deploying in the version 11. So now we're going to be able to deliver, our near zero RPO times. Before our previous engine has the ability, it's kind of snapshot based, so it was on a schedule interval, and usually that's within minutes of an RPO, but this is actually going to greatly enhance that to bring that down to near zero or within seconds now from a continuous data protection. So all good stuff, and it's all going to be focused around a lot of those APIs, those new APIs that were delivered within the VMware platform, right? That's what we're leveraging to kind of deliver this new feature. The other is our hardened Linux repositories. So now we have the ability to take Linux repositories and make them immutable. So setting those object locked features on Linux repository is another great feature that we're delivering. So customers that have that Linux repositories can take advantage of some of those features there. Archive to the cloud. So we've had the ability, to store backups into our object storage, providers, in the AWS and Azure standpoint. But we've actually increased that capability that, in the past it was, our hot or cool storage, but nothing supporting like Azure Archive or Glacier support within AWS. So this is a new feature coming in the version 11 that we are going to add an archive tier to where we can move data from, on-prem to, maybe it's that object storage in the warm tier. And then, as data ages out, we can actually even, move that off to that archive tier so that we can really cost optimize that data, that 3-2-1 or that data strategy of keeping longer term archives. So you're not paying that higher cost for storage there. And then our instant recovery, we've had this feature for quite some time. We had the ability to basically take a virtual machine or even physical machines and then mount them as a, from the backup file, mount them as a virtual machine, so where we can recover them instantly by running off of that backup file, so we can, make that machine available within a matter of a few minutes. So what we've done now with our version 11 release is, instead of doing it at a machine level, now we've expanded that to where now we can take our databases, so our SQL, Oracle, and even some of our NAS capabilities too. We can take those backups, from a SQL standpoint or Oracle standpoint, and mount that database as an instance within your SQL environment, to where we can get that up in a much faster standpoint. So our RPOs, again, focused on bringing those RPOs down, or RTOs down, within the instant recovery realm of Veeam backup and replication. And then one of our other bigger ones that we've had, this request for quite some time that we're delivering is we're expanding our agent support within Veeams for those physical machines or those machines that we can't back up at a VM level, right? We're doing that now with expanding our offering in our Linux environment, as well as our biggest is adding a whole new platform. So Mac is our biggest agent release here that we're coming out with. So now for those Mac servers, or even more importantly, those Mac remote users, right? Those workloads on the PC side, those remote agents now can be protected through our Veeam backup and replication product. So again, a lot of enhancements. Again, I only able to touch on a few here today, but stay tuned. Sign up for that launch date on the 24th from Veeam.
Excellent. Thank you all so much. My name is Patrick Murray. I am the regional SE here with ExaGrid. Like Adam said, I've been with ExaGrid about 8 months, but before that was a Veeam SE for about 4.5 years. And today we're going to talk about the other half of this, right? So we've spoken about how important data protection is, how important ransomware protection is from a data protection application standpoint in the form of Veeam. Now we're going to talk about how ExaGrid as backup storage can assist with that, right? There we go. So a little bit about us, right? We've been a company ourselves for about 15 years. 2 best-of-breed products, right? Very similar net promoter scores. Both kind of market disruptors, very tightly integrated. We're both industry award winners, right? As for us exclusively, we're the only tiered backup storage approach, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a second, what that means. And we've got hundreds of success stories, right? On Veeam customers alone. Thousands of customers overall, a lot of them Veeam. But before we talk about that, let's talk about like actual ExaGrid itself, right? What is an ExaGrid? Why should anyone consider an ExaGrid? Well, I've been doing data protection for a long time, which qualifies me uniquely to talk about this specific thing, right? Which is to say backup storage. When customers are shopping for backup storage, they're generally pulling from one of these 2 pools, or evaluating from one of these 2 pools, right? Either low-cost disk, which is very straightforward, right? Inexpensive disk, either in the form of a NAS like a Synology, or just a server, a Dell and HP server, right? Some just low-cost disk. Very fast, very inexpensive, right? There's no processing happening there, but it doesn't scale, right? If you're keeping more than like a week's worth of backup on disk, and I really hope that everyone here is keeping more than a week's worth of backup, it just doesn't scale very well, right? The other side of this coin is kind of your inline deduplication appliance route, right? Your data domains, your store once, etc. And these kind of have their a different set of considerations, almost the opposite set of considerations, which is to say very high cost of entry comparatively, very good data reduction, but at a cost that is sometimes unforeseen, right? All of these are inline dedupe appliances, which means that all data sent to these appliances is deduplicated on write. This has 2 primary considerations for backing up and restoring. The first is that this is going to add an overhead to your backups, right? The fact that there's an additional process that has to happen means that your backup windows aren't as fast as they could be, just period, hard stop. The other half of this is restores are going to be slow, right? Because every single byte is deduplicated as soon as it's written. Anytime you touch that data, whether it's to do a restore, whether it's to create a second copy or go out to tape, it's going to require rehydration, which can be costly from a time perspective, right? So the idea behind the ExaGrid is that we are the best of both worlds. We take the best parts of disk and deduplication and combine them while minimizing the consideration. And we do this by taking each of our boxes and splitting them into two halves. On the front half, we have our landing zone, right? You can kind of tell that the color coordination follows the previous slide, right? Our landing zone is very analogous to straight disk in that we just want to ingest data as quickly as possible. We want to get it in, get it on disk so that the backup windows can stay fast and short. We also keep a copy of that data, the most recent copy of that backups on this landing zone for fast restorations, right? Consider all most time-sensitive restorations in your environment are probably from the most recent copy of backups. Something along the lines of, hey, I deleted this file, or I saved over this file, or even something like, hey, this server never came back up from patches, right? We need a copy of the server ASAP. Those are things you don't want to have to wait for rehydration for, which is why, again, we're just restoring this directly from that landing zone. The other half of the box is where we do all of our data reduction, right? We call this the repository tier, retention tier. Data gets into this via a process we call adaptive deduplication. Right? Again, we're not doing inline dedupe. We're letting data land on that landing zone and analyzing it after the fact. Once we analyze that, we move it back to our repository. Right? This kind of gets you the only tiered backup storage appliance that you can buy today on the market that does it exactly like we do. In terms of the actual hardware itself, right, so kind of talking this from a security focus, because you want your backups to be secure where they sit, right? Just like you want to be able to use a data protection utility that has a focus on security, on securing your backups, securing your restores. It makes sense that you would want to continue that chain of security with backup storage. For us, we have a bunch of redundancy built in for this, in part, right? We'll talk about how we protect against ransomware in a second. But all of our boxes are RAID 6. We have redundant power supplies, redundant NICs. We do security, data encryption at rest, right? You don't have to worry about data encryption in terms of losing encryption codes or things like that from Veeam. That doesn't happen with us. We do all of our encryption at the hardware level using self-encrypting drives. And then anything we send across the WAN from ExaGrid to ExaGrid is also encrypted. And again, kind of focusing this through a security-focused lens, as it were. So let's talk about specifically Veeam and how we work with Veeam, right? So we work with a lot of data protection utilities, but none of them quite have the same story as ExaGrid and Veeam. We have Veeam code running on the ExaGrid in these scenarios. Right? A lot of other appliances will require additional Veeam infrastructure, right? Things like a gateway server or a server that has to sit in front of your data domain or in front of your Synology or something like that. And if you don't have that, the environment may be slow, right? It may not perform exactly how you need it to. With that, you don't have to worry about it. Like I said, the Veeam data mover is running on the ExaGrid, so it becomes a drop-in repository. There's very little additional configuration after the initial configuration of rack stack cable configure. And again, ingesting data directly from Veeam and landing on a disk as fast as possible with how fast Veeam already can move data makes it so that we're able to provide a very, very short window, very, very fast backups. So we talked about restoring from the landing zone, but Veeam has really interesting functionality in terms of instant VM recovery. Instant VM recovery allows you to restore a backup from, to boot up a virtual machine from the backup file rather than restoring it to disk. Things that are very difficult to do when you're talking about dealing with rehydration. Something we're not concerned with, because again, if we're doing sure backup from the most recent backups, it's undeduplicated, right? It's sitting on that landing zone. And then we also fully support Veeam's scale-out repository, a scale-out backup repository configuration, making it really easy to expand your environment. Right? If you purchase another ExaGrid, you add the ExaGrid into your scale-out repository with the addition of being able to perform global deduplication across all of those sober extents. Something that we're actually bringing to the table on top of Veeam, right? Rather than just interacting with Veeam, that's additional functionality ExaGrid is able to provide, right? Making it a very, very tight fit. All these things make it a very tight fit configuration. Like I mentioned, the Veeam deployment with an ExaGrid is very straightforward, right? There's no gateway server, there's no additional server that you have to put in front of the ExaGrid. Again, making it a drop-in replacement. Most of these installs that our support helps with are configure IP addresses, configure shares, present that to present that to Veeam, and then we're ready to start backing up, right? It's a very, very straightforward installation. And again, that's because we've got Veeam data running, or the Veeam code running on that ExaGrid. In addition to streamlining that backup process, it actually makes the whole deployment more secure, right? Consider a SIX share, right? Just an SMB share that you are backing up to from Veeam. At any point during the day, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, anyone on your network can access that SIX share. They may not have permission to actually do anything, but it's accessible over the network, which is potentially risky if someone has access to your network. With ExaGrid running Veeam code on it, that share is only ever presented to Veeam and presented directly to the Veeam backup proxy at time of backup, meaning that data just isn't sitting on the network all day ready to be accessed. Again, adding an additional degree of security just by leveraging an ExaGrid as your Veeam repository, right? We haven't even gotten to any type of ransomware or immutability option. In terms of synthetic pulls, same type of deal. Synthetic pulls are very simple for us to perform because, again, a process that would normally be hindered greatly by rehydration, we don't have an issue performing because, again, all that data that we would be synthesizing that synthetic pull out of is already accessible to us on our landing zone. Just another example of our architecture really lending to this tightly integrated solution between the two. Again, data, so us versus like traditional dedupe appliances, right? It's just going to be, it just makes more sense, right? More sense over straight disk copies as long as you're keeping a significant amount of data or even like more than a week or two of data on disk, and then so much faster ingest than all of those. Really kind of solving a lot of problems with just the architecture. We kind of talked about this scale-out backup repository already, so I won't go too much further into this. Suffice to say, it's a really good piece of functionality. Like I can't talk enough about how easy to use Veeam makes this scale-out repository and how nicely we just click into that on the back end. Again, allowing for like drop-in, drop-out of repositories. For DR, right, if you want us to get data from A to B, we absolutely can, right? Obviously, Veeam can do this as well. Veeam can move data up to a secure location in the cloud. Veeam can move data off the tape if that's where you would like your data to live long term. We can also move that Veeam data on the back end in a more efficient form, right? And I say more efficient because we are only ever copying or replicating in this manner deduplicated data. So think of it as just adding another process onto the process I already spoke about with adaptive deduplication. Right? We ingest data from Veeam. That data lands on the landing zone. Our adaptive dedupe process analyzes that data, moves it to our repository, and if replication is configured, then we replicate that share to another ExaGrid. This lightens the load of your whole environment, right? Because again, if data doesn't have to be reprocessed anywhere along the line, it also makes us more efficient when we're sending data over bandwidth, which is really useful in places where bandwidth is expensive or bandwidth is in short supply. Right? It's just a more efficient way of leveraging this. We support a lot of different DR scenarios, whether it's 2 ExaGrids either physically, right? One at your location, one at your secondary location, one at your primary location, one at a co-location facility you're renting, et cetera. We can also put an ExaGrid up in AWS and soon in the future in Azure. But let's talk about what we're here to talk about, right? Which is how we can help with Veeam protect us from ransomware. And this functionality we call retention time lock. But before we get into it, let's talk a little bit about what we're concerned with here. What were we trying to solve with retention time lock? And it's a little bit different than you might expect, right? The ExaGrid isn't actually concerned with data being encrypted by ransomware. We don't care, truthfully, because it can't happen. And it can't happen because of the architecture we already spoke about. That repository that I mentioned, where we move all of the data to, and where we do all of our data reduction, isn't network facing. Right? Data only gets into it via adaptive deduplication from the landing zone, and only gets out of it when we're rehydrating data from our repository, presenting it to the backup server, right, for a restore or something like that. Furthermore, it is an object store, which means that it's a non-standard file system. So it not being network facing internal processes being the only way data gets in or out, and it being an object store means that the data that lives there, which is again most of the data that sits on the ExaGrid, if not all of the data, after that initial dedupe process is complete, is protected from being encrypted with ransomware. It just can't be done. So what are we concerned with? Well, we're concerned with a more sophisticated ransomware attack, right? A ransomware attack where someone, instead of just getting into a network and launching their attack, where there may be backups to be able to restore them, we're concerned with an attack where someone gains access to, say, the front-end server, right? And deletes all the backups, a confirmed delete all these backups. In this scenario, very scary, right? Because backups are generally the last line of defense against these kinds of attacks. So if the backups are gone, the backups have been deleted, there's nothing to recover from. It's a checkmate scenario. Right? Very little remediation available to that individual outside of paying the ransom, which we never want to do, right? And that's the kind of attack, and that's the kind of sophistication that retention time lock is meant to prevent precisely, right? And we do this by essentially putting a timer on our data. So when we turn retention time lock on, it defaults to 10 days. That can be increased to up to 30 days, or anywhere in between. And how it works is when we process a delete for data, and we process a lot of them, right? Consider a Veeam backup job with 30 days of retention. From day 31 until day end of time, right? We're always going to be deleting a backup. If we're allotted for 30 retention points, we have 31, we've got to scrub one of them, integrate it into the full, whatever. We have to end up with 30 at the end of the day. So it's very difficult for us to process a good delete versus a bad delete. There's really no difference. And this is the beauty of retention time lock, right? Is that when something is deleted, whether it is deleted manually or deleted as a regular process, we'll acknowledge that delete. We tell Veeam, absolutely, we've deleted this. You don't have to worry about it, and it will show in the Veeam interface as deleted. But what we've actually done is hung on to that data, and we hang on to it similar to how Exchange hangs on to data within their O365 deleted items folder, right? For as long as that timer is set, right? That 10 days, that 30 days, etc. So if something happens and the environment gets compromised, we're not concerned with it, right? We have available remediation and can take all of that data that was potentially deleted and restore it back into production. So I like to go in a little further than this, right? Because now you've got the big picture of how it works, right? But what does it look like? And so as a former VMSC, I know a lot about how all of the backup processes work and things like that. So a ransomware attack of this nature would probably look like a bunch of failed messages right around backup time. Right? Veeam is an incremental data protection solution, which means that it requires and relies heavily on what happened yesterday to figure out what to do today. So a ransomware attack where everything's deleted is going to look like a lot of failed messages around backup time. It is going to look like, say, backup started at 505, Veeam does a little bit of processing before that. So around 505, 506, you're going to see a lot of error messages from Veeam saying, I'm having a really hard time finding yesterday's backup files, and also all the files before that. I have failed these jobs because I can't do anything. And it is at that point that you know something bad has happened, right? Something is terrible. But even before the Veeam interface, right? The first step in that situation should be the ExaGrid. One, to make sure the ExaGrid is still there, right? Someone didn't take down the switch. It could be, something silly like that. But let's assume the worst, right? That, nope, the ExaGrid's still there. Someone just deleted all this data. There is a big button at the top of the interface. It's kind of the first thing you see when you log into the ExaGrid interface and have retention time lock turned on. That says stop all shares. It's like your break glass in case of emergency button. Right? What that's going to do is that's going to stop everything. It's going to stop all those timers. It's going to stop that retention time lock timer. It's going to stop data in, data out, just pause everything. And what that's going to give us is a breathing room. It's going to give us the ability to do kind of a reverse root cause analysis of the environment. In that scenario, the process would most likely be determine if anything was encrypted in production. I think I would take a look at the workloads, what was potentially affected, see what you have to restore from backup. Go to Veeam and identify which of those backups you need to restore from has been deleted. And go to the ExaGrid, undelete those backups, restore those backups from Veeam, right? Very, very simple process, very straightforward, very powerful capabilities in terms of effectively stopping any semblance of ransomware in their tracks, right? Using the security functionality of Veeam on the front end and the security functionality of the ExaGrid on the back end, you can really create a tried and true immutable data protection solution without it breaking the bank, right? Without having a third box that has to sit offline purely for immutable backups. On top of that, this functionality is free. It comes with every ExaGrid customer that purchases an ExaGrid gets this functionality. This is just a part of our 6.0 firmware that we rolled out in late November of last year. And we've actually already had customers use this to fend off ransomware attacks. The last thing I'll mention, and the last thing I want to mention about the ExaGrid is our support story, because it's different and it helps, right? You noticed on the last slide, I'm sure, that get ExaGrid support involved in that process. And that's because of the different approach we've taken. Consider generalized support that has a tiered system. Probably every vendor you work with now has a tiered support system, where you pick up the phone, you call, and you get a tier 1 person. And they really have two jobs. They have the job of determining, does this person have a support contract in the first place? And then if you do, taking down all your information, like your air logs, everything, right? Creating a ticket and then handing off to somebody else to do. Maybe in a few hours, maybe in a few days. But it's still, there's like this layer of disconnect, this like layer of frustration of having to, not having a direct line to support, right? Kind of just being like another person in the queue. We've taken an opposite approach to that. So we have a support, we've done away with tiered support. And when someone becomes an ExaGrid customer, we assign them a support engineer. And that engineer is theirs, assigned to their account for the duration of their tenure as an ExaGrid customer. On top of that, that support engineer is trained in their backup utility of choice. Right? So if you have a Veeam environment, you're going to get an ExaGrid engineer who's trained in Veeam. And I like to think of them as an extension of the data protection team, who you don't have to pay, and whose job is really just to stare at your backup storage all day. Make sure that it's working correctly from a hardware standpoint, a physical standpoint. There are no issues with drives, there are no issues with power supplies, network, etc. From a logical standpoint, right, make sure capacity looks good, deduplication is occurring correctly, replication is happening in a timely manner. We're good as far as capacity. But also from an environmental standpoint, right? They understand ExaGrid, obviously, they understand your data protection utility, and they understand how it interacts. So they kind of become this secondary or possibly tertiary resource for you that you can kind of rely on that you otherwise wouldn't. And that's pretty much the high level here, right? These are our big 4 takeaways. Yeah, thank you guys. Really appreciate it.
Great, thank you very much, Patrick. And like I said, we use the Veeam and ExaGrid solution at Peters and Associates, so we have a lot of experience with it. I do want to touch on it. Let me move my slideshow here back to my slides, and I've just got a couple left, and we should have some time for any questions at the end. But that the retention time lock feature, actually, we have already had success with that at one of our customers. So I'll just kind of frame a quick story here. The environment at our customer was compromised by ransomware. Prior to the ransomware going out and encrypting things, the backup jobs had all been deleted. The attackers attempted to delete backup data. I'm sure believed that they had deleted the backup data, which was sitting on ExaGrid appliances, and so this environment had been encrypted. The ransom demand was for $150,000. I believe if they paid within 9 or 10 days, it doubled beyond that. So obviously this customer was in quite a bit of trouble. But as it so happened, ExaGrid had released their, I think it was 6.0.7 that first introduced the retention time lock feature. We had gotten that installed on their systems the week prior, and so that really did save their bacon. It prevented the destruction of, I think, about 2.7 terabytes of data that we were able to recover from the ExaGrid appliances. Again, I think something that the attackers believed that they had probably already deleted in advance. But we always emphasize at Peters having layered security when it comes to how you're protecting the environment, but also how you're recovering the environment. And this is just a really good example of where this feature has been successful. So I believe ExaGrid released 6.0.8 last week. So we are encouraging any of our current ExaGrid customers, let's get that rolled out as soon as possible. And if you are not a currently an ExaGrid customer or a Veeam customer, certainly something we can talk about implementing. And like I said, seen a lot of success with this already. A couple slides I want to touch on, just from how Peters and Associates can help. And the first thing I'll talk about just a general backup and recovery assessment. This is something, and I'll just build this slide out real quickly. This is something that we're offering for $1,000 through the end of March. But let's evaluate where we are from a backup and recovery assessment. The world has changed quite a bit, obviously, and possibly since you last evaluated this. But let's review. Are you encrypting backups? We didn't really talk about it today, but something that that Veeam, I think, has been really well known for is the 3-2-1 backup strategy. Are you saving multiple versions of your data, storing it across multiple different storage mediums, and storing it in different locations? I think we would also add, some kind of strategy thinking along the ransomware lines. Do you have an offline backup copy, or do you have some kind of immutable or time lock type storage? Let's evaluate all of that and see where you stand and see where improvements can be made. So we'll have an engineer review the technical side of things, but we'll also pair a project manager to talk through more of the strategy things, direction you're going in. Are there compliance standards that you're trying to meet or not meeting today that you should be? All of that is kind of bundled up together, result in recommendations for improving your stature and kind of taking a measured approach to doing so. And then the other area where we are assisting, I think, a number of you is co-managed backup and recovery for your backups. So we use Veeam as our primary backup solution here, and we also have customers where we're helping manage along with the ExaGrids that they're using. So supporting backups locally, supporting backups to a secondary site to prevent from disaster at the primary data center, as well as offline storage options and immutable storage options to protect in the event of ransomware. So all things, if you're looking to have your own team focus on more strategic initiatives, our team is handling this backup for somewhere around 200 servers today across our customers. So we do the daily backup reviews. If there are issues with that, our team is going to handle error remediation. Of course, we do recovery testing and also assist during recovery as well. So all things that our team is capable of doing. Would encourage you to reach out if you have any questions. And with that, I've really only got one more slide, and then we'll open the floor more broadly to questions. I haven't seen any questions yet, so you guys must be thinking really hard about what you'd like to ask. So please feel free to type those in. So just to kind of close things out, if you have interest in that backup recovery assessment, reach out. You can schedule through your account manager. You can schedule through me. Schedule through info@peters.com, but please reach out and we can talk about it. If you have interest in ExaGrid or Veeam or anything that we talked about today, Peters and Associates can lead that discussion. So again, reach out to us and we're happy to start that conversation. Same with anything regarding the managed services aspect of our backup and recovery. And then lastly, I'll plug a couple other webinars. You know, our marketing machine keeps on rolling. So February 16th, that's next Tuesday, same time, we're going to hold our monthly Teams webinar, which Tim Homan leads. So don't miss that. And then since it's right in line with this security discussion that we've been having today, and especially with ransomware, on February 23rd, we will hold again our monthly cybersecurity webinar, and I think it's a little bit different format this month. I believe Bruce will be speaking entirely on the ransomware topic. So we're obviously seeing a lot of ransomware. I think we tend to be called close to, I would say, once a month for some kind of help in resolving issues related to ransomware. So it's popping up a lot. And so the 23rd, if you don't have the invite already, please reach out and I'll make sure it's in your inbox and on your calendar. And with that being said, we've got about 5 minutes left reserved here. So I would ask that if you do have any questions, please go ahead and fire away. And those of you that don't have any questions, you can feel free to drop, but I will hang out here for a couple of minutes before we close things out. Okay, I don't see any questions coming through. No one has taken themselves off mute or raised their hand, and I don't see anybody typing. So I think we're gonna go ahead and close things out. Thank you for joining us again. We hope to talk to you soon, whether it's about backup and recovery with Veeam and ExaGrid, or it's on another one of our regular webinars. So thank you all very much. Have a great day.